7 more days, without pay, for questioning my authority during the client meeting. Kent announced it loudly across the open office space, arms crossed over his chest, eyes drilling into mine. 20 coworkers pretended to focus on their monitors. No one looked at me directly. The initial 3-day suspension clearly wasn't enough for you to learn your place, Verna. I stood perfectly still, controlling my breathing like I'd been trained. Not too shallow, not too deep, just enough to keep thinking clearly. Do you understand? He pressed when I didn't respond. Perfectly, I replied, voice steady. I gathered my worn leather notebook, the same one I'd carried through war zones and back. The one with calculations proving something was terribly wrong with our latest testing reports. Kent smiled, mistaking my calm for defeat. I simply nodded, turned, and walked out without another word. The April air hit my face as I pushed through the glass doors. My car was parked at the far end of the lot, where Kent had reassigned my space after my first suspension. I placed my notebook carefully on the passenger seat and sat motionless behind the wheel. Before I continue, thank you for listening to my story. I'm curious, where are you listening from today? Drop a comment and let me know what part of the world you're in. Sometimes knowing who's hearing your story makes the telling easier. My name is Verna Thale. I'm 42 years old with a face most people forget minutes after meeting me. That's not self-pity. It was an asset in my former life. I'm average height, average build, with brown hair that doesn't quite reach my shoulders. I wear minimal makeup and clothes designed to blend in. The kind of person who can stand in a crowded elevator without anyone remembering I was there. For 12 years, that forgettability was my greatest tool. I wasn't always Verna Thale. I've had many names, many identities. What remained consistent was my purpose. I verified intelligence about protective equipment provided to military personnel. Equipment meant to keep them alive. My background wasn't in engineering or materials science. It was in mathematics and human observation. I could spot patterns in data and inconsistencies in human behavior with equal precision. When manufacturers claimed certain levels of protection, I analyzed whether those claims matched reality. Sometimes this meant sitting in bland offices, reviewing testing data. Other times it meant being in locations where no American was supposed to exist, watching how our equipment performed when bullets were real and explosives weren't theoretical. I've held the hands of 19-year-olds who died because their protective gear failed. I've promised them their deaths wouldn't be meaningless, that someone would care about why they died, that someone would make it right. 3 years ago, I grew tired. The travel, the aliases, the constant vigilance. It hollows you out eventually. I requested reassignment to something quieter. My superiors agreed I'd earned it. They helped create a normal employment record, showing a sensible career progression in data analysis. Nothing remarkable, nothing threatening, just another mid-level professional taking notes in meetings. That's how I joined Aventex Testing Services, a small firm handling quality assurance for military equipment. My role was simple: review testing protocols and verify results before certification. I was supposed to be the final safeguard, ensuring that what we claimed about equipment performance was absolutely true. For 2 years, everything seemed legitimate. The company wasn't perfect. Kent pushed timelines too hard and valued efficiency over thoroughness, but the testing itself appeared sound. Until 3 weeks ago, I was reviewing data for a new lightweight ballistic vest. Something about the numbers bothered me, small inconsistencies in the penetration tests. I recalculated everything and found that the vests were failing at impact velocities they should have withstood according to military requirements. Yet the final report showed passing grades across all testing phases. I checked previous reports and found similar patterns. Equipment that should have failed was being certified as combat ready. When I first approached Kent about these discrepancies, he seemed concerned. These are serious accusations, Verna. I'll need to review everything myself. 2 days later, he called me into his office. I checked your findings, he said while shuffling papers on his desk. You've made some analytical errors. The equipment meets all required standards. He slid a folder toward me. Here's where you went wrong. The documents inside contained calculations I'd never seen, using testing protocols different from our standard procedures. But this isn't how we… Verna, he interrupted. You're relatively new to formal testing environments. These modified protocols have been approved for this particular contract. By whom? I asked. His expression hardened. That's above your clearance level. But if the vests fail at these velocities, 3 days, he said. Take 3 days without pay to reconsider your priorities here. When you return, I expect this matter to be closed. I spent those 3 days documenting everything, every calculation, every discrepancy, every modified protocol that didn't match military requirements. I created a comprehensive analysis showing exactly how the equipment was being misrepresented. When I returned, I remained quiet for a week. I observed who handled the reports, who signed off on final certifications, who communicated with the clients. I noticed patterns in communication that suggested Kent wasn't acting alone. Then came the client meeting. Representatives from the Military Procurement Division visited to discuss the new contract. During the presentation of testing results, I raised my hand. Kent's jaw tightened, but with clients present, he had to acknowledge me. Yes, Verna? Make it quick, please. I've found some inconsistencies in our testing data that I believe warrant further review before certification, I said calmly. The vests are failing at impact velocities that should be within protective range. The room went quiet. One of the military representatives leaned forward. What kind of inconsistencies? Before I could answer, Kent laughed, a deliberate, dismissive sound. Verna's new to our testing protocols. She's misinterpreting standard variations in the data. Everything has been verified by our senior team, but the numbers clearly show. That's enough. Kent cut me off. We'll discuss your concerns privately, Verna. The military representatives exchanged glances but didn't press further. The meeting continued while I sat silently, documenting every word in my notebook. Afterward, Kent walked directly to my desk, my office. Inside, he didn't offer me a seat. What the hell was that? He demanded. The vests are failing, Kent. Soldiers will die believing they're protected when they're not. You have no idea the complexity of these contracts or the modifications that have been approved. Show me the documentation for these approved modifications, I challenged. His expression shifted. Something calculating replaced the anger. You know what your problem is, Verna? You think you're irreplaceable. You're not. You're a data analyst with decent skills, but limited understanding of how this business works. This isn't about business. It's about lives. He laughed again. How charmingly naive. Take tomorrow off, without pay. Think about whether this is the hill you want to die on professionally. I didn't back down. The next day, instead of staying home, I arrived with my complete analysis and requested a meeting with both Kent and his superior, Murray. I was told Murray was unavailable, but I left the report with his assistant. 2 days later, Kent stopped by my desk with a strange smile. Murray reviewed your report, he said quietly. He found your methodology fundamentally flawed. That's impossible, yet true. He suggested you might benefit from additional training before continuing in your current role. Something felt wrong. I'd like to speak with Murray directly. He's traveling for the next 2 weeks, but he left this for you. Kent handed me an internal memo, questioning my analytical abilities and recommending a review of my position. I later discovered Murray had never seen my report. His assistant had given it directly to Kent, who had fabricated the response. The next client meeting was when Kent announced my extended suspension. 7 more days without pay, a public humiliation designed to break me or force me to quit. What he didn't understand was that I'd faced much worse than an office bully with something to hide. I'd been shot at, trapped behind enemy lines, and interrogated by people who didn't bother with office politics before resorting to violence. As I sat in my car that morning, suspended for the second time, I made a decision. Kent believed he'd won, that I would either resign or return broken and compliant. He had no idea who he was dealing with, or who would be making calls on my behalf. In my apartment that evening, I removed the false bottom from my kitchen drawer. Inside lay a small metal box containing 3 phone numbers, not saved in any phone, not written anywhere else. 3 connections to the person I used to be. 3 people who understood exactly what it meant when protection failed. It was time to make some calls. I made the calls using a phone that wasn't connected to any account in my name, one that Kent and Aventex knew nothing about. The first number belonged to Lane. We'd met during a mission in Eastern Europe 15 years ago. She'd been posing as a materials procurement specialist for a contractor, while actually assessing which officials could be compromised. I was evaluating whether a new type of body armor would actually stop the caliber of ammunition common in the region. When gunfire erupted during what was supposed to be a routine meeting, Lane and I escaped together. We spent 3 days hiding in an abandoned train station, taking turns sleeping while the other kept watch. By the time extraction arrived, we knew each other's real capabilities. Now, Lane headed an international oversight committee that approved military contracts. Verna, she answered, on the second ring. No surprise in her voice, though it had been nearly 2 years since we'd spoken. You're still using this number. Some connections are worth maintaining, I said. This isn't social, she replied. Not a question. No, tell me. I explained the situation at Avantex, the falsified testing data, the modified protocols, the equipment being certified despite failing critical tests. You're certain? She asked when I finished. I've triple-checked everything. The vests are failing at velocities they're rated to withstand. Someone's hiding it. Silence stretched between us. Then, send me what you have. Use the old method. The old method was a dead-drop technique we'd developed during our active years. Digital information hidden within seemingly innocent files, accessible only with specific decryption protocols. There's more, I continued. I think this goes beyond my immediate supervisor. The pattern suggests systematic falsification across multiple contracts. How high? I don't know yet. That's partly why I'm calling. I'll make inquiries, Lane said, discreetly. Thank you. Verna, she added before I could disconnect. Be careful. If you're right, someone's prioritizing profit over protection. Those people rarely stop at workplace discipline. The second call went to Marcus. He'd been a field operative alongside me for 3 years. We'd shared cramped surveillance positions for days at a time, communicating in whispers and hand signals. When an operation went wrong near Kabul, he carried me 2 miles to extraction with a bullet lodged in his shoulder. Now he worked as a senior examiner in the Pentagon's budget office, reviewing military expenditures. I thought you were done, he said when he realized who was calling. So did I. But some promises don't expire. Marcus understood immediately. We'd both made those promises. To wounded soldiers, to families receiving folded flags, to ourselves on nights when sleep wouldn't come. I explained the situation at Avantex. 7 days suspension? He asked when I finished. Yes, that gives us time. Can you transmit your evidence? Already packaging it for Lane. I'll copy you. Good. I'll run trace analysis on Avantex's financial patterns. See where the money's flowing. Who's benefiting from these shortcuts? Be careful, I warned. This likely involves people with significant influence. Always, he replied. You taught me that. The third call was the hardest. Not because of any technical difficulty, but because it reopened wounds that had never fully healed. The number connected me to Drew. 7 years ago, outside Kandahar, I'd pulled him from a burning vehicle after an IED detonated beneath it. His body armor had partially melted into his skin. The helmet that should have protected him from the impact had cracked along a manufacturing seam. He'd lost his left leg below the knee and suffered third-degree burns across 40% of his body. During his recovery, I visited whenever my cover allowed. We never discussed my actual role. He believed I was a civilian contractor who happened to be nearby during the attack, but a connection formed between us. Now Drew worked as the personal aide to General Harmon, who signed off on equipment contracts for an entire division. This is unexpected, he said when he recognized my voice. I apologize for that. Don't. It's good to hear from you. Everything okay? I hesitated. Drew had suffered enough because of equipment failures. Involving him meant asking him to relive that trauma. Verna, are you there? I'm here. And no, everything is not okay. I explained the situation, providing specific details about the testing discrepancies. When I finished, Drew was silent for so long I thought the connection might have dropped. Drew? I'm here, he said. His voice changed. Harder. You're telling me they're knowingly certifying substandard protection? Again? Yes. And you have proof? Substantial proof. Another long pause. Then, send everything you have. I'll make sure the general sees it personally. This might blow back on you, I cautioned. Let it, Drew answered. I still wake up reaching for a leg that isn't there. If I can prevent someone else from experiencing that, any consequence is worth it. After completing the calls, I sat in my small living room, staring at the wall. My apartment was sparsely furnished, a habit from years of needing to leave places quickly. Nothing irreplaceable, nothing that couldn't be abandoned if necessary. For the next 7 days, I maintained complete radio silence. I didn't contact anyone at Avantex. I didn't reach out to Lane, Marcus, or Drew. I didn't check my work email. Instead, I did what years of training had taught me to do. I waited patiently and prepared for multiple outcomes. I fixed my leaking kitchen sink, painted my hallway a soft blue, organized my bookshelves. Simple, repetitive tasks that kept my hands busy while my mind processed possibilities. At night, I reviewed my documentation again and again, ensuring I hadn't missed anything. I created multiple copies stored in different locations, some physical, some digital, all secure. On the third day of my suspension, someone knocked on my apartment door. I approached silently, checking through the peephole. It was Jess from accounting at Avantex, shifting nervously from foot to foot. I opened the door but blocked the entrance. "Jess, this is unexpected." Her eyes darted past me into the apartment, then back to my face. "Kent doesn't know I'm here." I waited, saying nothing. "Can I come in?" she asked, glancing down the hallway. I hesitated, then stepped aside. Once inside, Jess didn't sit when I offered. She stood in my living room, clutching her purse against her chest. "I've been reviewing the financial approvals for the testing protocols," she said. "The ones you questioned." I kept my expression neutral. "And? There are irregularities, payments to consultants with no deliverables, budget transfers between projects without proper documentation, cost adjustments after certification." "Why are you telling me this?" Jess took a deep breath. "My brother's in the Army. Second deployment. He wears the equipment we certify." Understanding dawned. "You're worried." "Terrified," she corrected. "If what you found is true." "It is. Then my brother and his unit are walking around thinking they're protected when they're not." Her voice broke slightly. "I can't let that happen." "What do you want from me, Jess?" "I want to help. I have access to financial records you don't. Transaction histories, vendor agreements, modification approvals." I considered her offer carefully. Trust wasn't something I gave easily, and this could be an elaborate trap set by Kent. "How do I know Kent didn't send you?" Jess reached into her purse and pulled out a flash drive. "Because this would get me fired, possibly prosecuted. It contains every financial record related to test modifications for the past 3 years. Look at it. If you decide I'm trustworthy, contact me." She placed the drive on my coffee table and headed toward the door, pausing with her hand on the knob. "My brother trusts that equipment with his life," she said quietly. "I need to make sure it deserves that trust." After she left, I spent hours examining the files on the drive, cross-referencing them with my own findings. What emerged was a troubling pattern. Test modifications coincided with payments to a consulting firm called Strategic Solutions Group. Further investigation revealed this firm was owned by a holding company connected to Murray's brother-in-law. Money was flowing from the manufacturer to Strategic Solutions, then being distributed through various channels, including offshore accounts linked to shell companies. Some of those companies made regular payments to accounts associated with both Murray and Kent. They weren't just falsifying test results, they were being paid to do so. By day 5 of my suspension, I had compiled a comprehensive dossier, linking the falsified testing to specific payments. I encrypted this information and sent it to Lane, Marcus, and Drew using our secure channels. Responses came within hours. From Lane, verification complete. Bringing in specialized investigators. Stay in position. From Marcus, financial trails confirmed. Found 6 additional contracts with identical patterns. Briefing select committee members today. From Drew, General Harmon, reviewing personally. Wants to meet with you when this concludes. On day 7, my last day of suspension, my doorbell rang at 6:15 a.m. Through the peephole, I saw 2 individuals in plain clothes, standing in the hallway. Nothing about them immediately identified their affiliation, but their posture and awareness screamed federal service. I opened the door. "Miss Thale?" the woman asked, showing identification too quickly for me to fully read it. "Yes. May we come in? We have some questions regarding Avantex testing services." I let them in, offered coffee, which they declined, and answered their questions for nearly 3 hours. They asked about testing protocols, modification approvals, reporting structures, financial processes. I provided everything I knew, supported by documentation. When they finally stood to leave, the woman handed me a card with just a phone number. If you think of anything else, call this number directly. What happens now? I asked. That depends on what we find, the man replied, but I would prepare to return to work tomorrow as scheduled. Will I be safe? They exchanged glances. The woman spoke. No one at Avantex has been informed about this investigation. As far as they know, you're simply returning from suspension. We suggest maintaining that appearance. After they left, I spent the remainder of the day mentally preparing to re-enter the office, not as the compliant employee Kent expected to see, but as the trained operative I had once been, watchful, patient, gathering information. I slept dreamlessly that night, a skill honed during years of operations when rest was scarce but essential. The next morning, day 8, I dressed in unremarkable business attire and drove to Avantex. I used my badge to enter the building at exactly 8 a.m., nodding politely to security as if nothing unusual had occurred. The office felt strange. Conversations stopped when I passed. People watched me from the corners of their eyes. My desk appeared untouched, exactly as I had left it a week earlier. Kent's office remained empty throughout the morning. Whispers circulated that he was in an emergency meeting with Murray and the legal team. No one seemed to know why. At 11:47 a.m., the front desk receptionist called my extension. Verna, there are some visitors here asking for you. I gathered my notebook and walked calmly to the lobby. 3 people stood waiting. Though they wore civilian clothes with no visible identification, I recognized them immediately. Lane stood nearest the door, her posture relaxed but alert. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore a navy blazer over a white shirt. Nothing about her appearance suggested the power she wielded in international oversight. Marcus leaned against the reception desk, quietly chatting with the receptionist. His friendly demeanor concealed the fact that he could trace financial transactions across dozens of shell companies within hours. Drew stood by the window, sunshine highlighting the surgical scars on the left side of his face. His prosthetic leg was hidden beneath perfectly tailored slacks. Only his eyes revealed his true feelings, cold, determined, focused. When I approached, Lane stepped forward. "Miss Thale," she said formally, extending her hand. "Thank you for meeting with us." I shook her hand, maintaining the pretense that we were professional acquaintances rather than people who had once escaped death together. "Of course. How can I help you?" "We need to discuss some discrepancies in testing protocols for several defense contracts," she replied, her voice carrying just enough to be heard by those nearby. "Is there a conference room available?" The receptionist quickly directed us to the largest meeting room, looking nervous as she made the arrangements. Word spread rapidly through the office that something significant was happening. As we walked toward the meeting room, Jess from accounting approached, files clutched to her chest. "I have the financial documentation you requested," she said quietly. Lane nodded. "Please join us." Inside the meeting room, the atmosphere changed instantly. Professional facades dropped, replaced by the focused efficiency of people who had worked in high-pressure situations. "Everything's proceeding," Lane said, placing a slim laptop on the table. "Federal investigators have been building the case since we received your information. They'll arrive within the hour." "How widespread is it?" I asked. Marcus grimaced. 6 major contracts over 3 years, all with the same pattern of falsified testing and financial kickbacks. Possibly more we haven't uncovered yet. "And Kent, Murray, both heavily implicated," Drew said, his voice tight with controlled anger, "along with executives at 2 manufacturing companies." Lane turned her laptop toward me, showing a complex chart of financial transactions. "The money trail is clear. Manufacturers paid consulting fees to Strategic Solutions Group, which distributed funds through multiple channels. Some went offshore, then returned as investments in accounts controlled by Kent and Murray." "How much?" I asked. "Over $7 million. I sat back, letting that number sink in. $7 million in exchange for putting soldiers' lives at risk. Marcus leaned forward. "There's something else. The vests you flagged. They're already in distribution. 3,000 units shipped last month." My stomach tightened. "Where?" "Forward operating bases in 3 conflict zones." Drew's knuckles whitened as he gripped the edge of the table. "General Harmon has ordered an immediate recall, but it will take time to reach everyone." "We need to move quickly," Lane said, checking her watch. "Federal agents are coordinating with military investigators. They'll need your direct testimony." Before I could respond, the door opened. Kent stood in the doorway, Murray just behind him. Both men stopped abruptly when they saw who occupied the room. Kent recovered first, smoothing his expression into practiced confidence. I wasn't informed of a meeting in this room. That was intentional, Lane replied coolly, standing to face him. She didn't introduce herself or explain her presence. Kent's eyes darted between us, calculation evident. I see Verna has returned from her suspension and brought friends. Colleagues would be more accurate, Marcus said, remaining seated but shifting slightly to block Kent's view of the laptop screen. Murray stepped forward. This is highly irregular. I don't know who you people are, but this is a private company, and you're in a restricted area. I'll have to ask you to leave immediately. Drew smiled thinly. We're not going anywhere. Kent's expression hardened as he assessed the situation. Verna, in my office. Now, the rest of you can speak with our legal department if you have legitimate business here. I didn't move. I think we should all stay right here, Kent. There are some testing protocols we need to discuss. A flash of uncertainty crossed his face before he regained composure. If this is about your continued misunderstanding of our modified testing procedures, it's about fraud, Lane interrupted. Falsification of safety testing results, endangering military personnel, financial kickbacks, wire fraud across state lines. Should I continue? Murray's face paled. These are absurd accusations. We maintain the highest testing standards in the industry. Is that why you've been accepting payments through offshore accounts? Marcus asked, his tone conversational. For maintaining high standards? Kent's expression shifted from confidence to calculation. Whatever Verna has told you is the perspective of a disgruntled employee who doesn't understand our industry. Nothing more. I understand perfectly, I said, rising to stand beside Lane. I understand that you've been certifying equipment that fails critical safety tests, equipment that soldiers trust with their lives. You have no proof of that, Murray interjected, but his voice lacked conviction. Drew finally stood, moving with the careful grace of someone who has spent years adapting to a prosthetic limb. We have extensive proof, financial records, testing data, internal communications, witness testimony. Kent's eyes narrowed as he studied Drew. Who exactly are you people? The outer door opened again. Two individuals in suits entered, followed by military personnel in uniform. One showed credentials that made both Kent and Murray step back. Federal investigators, Lane explained unnecessarily. Hear about those testing protocols we mentioned. What followed was a carefully orchestrated process. The meeting room became command central as additional investigators arrived. Employees were interviewed, computers seized, records secured. Kent and Murray were separated and questioned in different rooms. Their initial bravado crumbled when shown the evidence, particularly when investigators revealed they had been under surveillance for weeks. I provided my formal statement, walking investigators through the testing discrepancies I had discovered and the responses from management when I raised concerns. By late afternoon, the office was in upheaval. Kent and Murray were escorted from the building, not in handcuffs but clearly in custody. Word spread quickly about the nature of the investigation. As daylight faded, Lane found me in the small break room, away from the chaos. You did well, she said, pouring coffee for both of us. What happens now? The investigation continues. Prosecutions will follow, but the immediate priority is addressing those 3,000 vests already distributed. And the company? That's being determined. There are options. The work you do here is essential, when done correctly. I nodded, understanding her meaning. The company might survive, but under new management and oversight. Drew appeared in the doorway. General Harmon is on secured video conference. He'd like to speak with you, Verna. In a makeshift secure room, General Harmon's face appeared on screen. His expression was grave. Miss Thale, he began formally, then softened. Verna, Drew has explained your background and your actions these past weeks. I want to personally thank you for bringing this to light. I just did what anyone would do, I replied. No, he said firmly. You did what very few would have the courage or capacity to do. You risked your career and possibly more to protect soldiers you'll never meet. He paused, glancing at documents off-screen. We've begun the recall process for the compromised equipment. Unfortunately, some units are in remote locations, difficult to reach quickly. The unspoken implication hung heavily in the air. Some soldiers would continue wearing inadequate protection until replacements arrived. I have a proposal, the general continued. We need someone to oversee the implementation of new testing protocols. someone with your background in both field operations and data analysis. Someone who understands what's at stake when equipment fails. Are you offering me a job, General? I'm offering you a mission, he corrected. One that aligns with promises I suspect you've made along the way. 4 months later, I stood in a different testing facility, one under direct military oversight, with transparent protocols and multiple verification requirements. The walls of my office held photographs of soldiers in the field, not as decoration, but as reminder of purpose. Kent and Murray had both accepted plea deals, providing evidence against manufacturing executives in exchange for reduced sentences. They would still serve substantial prison time for fraud and criminal endangerment. The company, formerly known as Avantex, had been restructured, with new leadership and strict oversight provisions. Jess from accounting now headed a compliance team that reported directly to an independent board. The compromised vests had all been recalled and replaced. No lives had been lost due to the faulty equipment. A fortunate outcome we celebrated quietly. One warm Tuesday afternoon, Drew visited my new office, moving more comfortably with his prosthetic than he had months earlier. General Harmon asked me to deliver this personally, he said, placing a folder on my desk. Inside was documentation for a new testing standard, officially named the Adler Protocol, after a young soldier who had died years earlier when his equipment failed during combat. A soldier whose hand I had held as he whispered final words meant for his mother. They're implementing it across all defense contracts, Drew explained. Every piece of protective equipment will be tested under these protocols. No exceptions, no modifications without multi-level review. I traced my fingers over the document, remembering a promise made in dust and blood. He would have been pleased. Yes, Drew agreed quietly. He would. We stood together at the window, watching as technicians in the testing range below prepared equipment for impact evaluation. Real tests, honest results. Not exactly the revenge some might have expected, Drew commented. It wasn't about revenge, I replied. It was about keeping promises. In the months that followed, I developed additional testing protocols, each designed to close loopholes and ensure that protective equipment actually protected. I trained new analysts to spot irregularities and question results that seemed too perfect. Sometimes during late evenings in my office, I would remember Kent's smirk as he announced my suspension, how certain he had been of his power, how confidently he had gambled with others' lives for financial gain. His current accommodation in a federal prison was certainly a fall from grace, but the true consequence, the one that mattered, was the new system that made it harder for others to repeat his crimes. 1 year after the investigation, I received a small package. Inside was a worn patch from a military uniform, along with a handwritten note. This vest stopped exactly what it was supposed to stop. I'm coming home to my family because the equipment worked. Someone told me you're the reason why. Thank you isn't enough, but it's what I have to offer. Sergeant T. I pinned the patch to my office wall, next to others that had arrived in similar packages. Tangible reminders that systems can be fixed, that speaking up matters, that promises kept save lives. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you in any way, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps stories like mine reach others who might need to hear them. If you've ever stood up against wrongdoing, even when it was difficult, share your experience in the comments below. Sometimes knowing we're not alone in our struggles makes all the difference.